Please welcome our keynote speaker, General Upendra Dwivedi.
Actually, after Mr. Arnab's inaugurating talk, there's nothing left for me to speak because he summed up everything. And when you give the keynote address, you cannot venture into any specialist field because there are specialists sitting here. And the journalist thing has already been covered, so I don't know what is to be done, but I'll still make an endeavor. And great to see the galaxy of elites here. We have the Devendra to Devendra sitting this side, and of course from Dwivedi, where I have left, to Dikuna. So I can see all the kind of elites sitting here. So I'll try and take some names and miss out some names. So of course, Air Chief Marshal R.K. Bhaduria sir, former Chief of Air Staff. And of course, Arun Sinha sir is here, our former Chairman Brahmos is here, General Dushyant is here, Devendra already spoken, and Baba Kalyani, who is the icon in all fields, so the leadership is concerned, Atmanirbharta is concerned, and G.D. Bakshi sir, whom we have been seeing from our academy days, that is from 1981 onwards, we have been following him. And good to see Baba Kalyani sir with full family. And again, so many people, but I may not be able to take the name, but I can just say that the senior leadership of the three services, officers and veterans, distinguished panelists, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone who is left out, consider that I have already addressed to you. So, firstly, it's a great privilege to come for this different kind of symposium or a conclave, where the audience is also of all flavors what we can talk about. And this is something where the first time the media house has, I think if I can say that, collaborated with the think tank of Army and tried to come out with a different flavor called as Forces First Conclave. This is timely as well as thoughtful, and it is reflecting the times of our, the realities what we are having. And in Mr. Arnab, if I need to say that he is the right combination of three P's, that is passion, perseverance, and purpose. So thank you for bringing us all together under one umbrella. So ladies and gentlemen, we live in an era of profound flux where the triad of competition, contestation, and conflict defines the character of interstate engagements. Almost every morning when you get up, we see a news of fresh strike in an ongoing conflict, not always kinetic. Sometimes in cyberspace, sometimes in narratives as already brought out. So across the world today, we have approximately 56 conflicts which are raging on with approximately 90 nations directly or indirectly. And it keeps changing every day, keeps increasing. It's not decreasing by any chance. So all this tells us that we live in an age of constant conflicts, if not wars. So even though Simon Sinek said that start with why? Understanding the causes of nation or the modern conflicts does not necessarily make its course any more predictable. If anything, it deepens the complexity of anticipating how and where the next spark may ignite. So against this backdrop, I intend to share my thoughts weaved around the four interlinked sub-themes of this conclave today. That is how future wars are unfolding before us, what we achieved and learned through Op Sindoor, how multi-domain operations are emerging as the new reality of warfare, and how these shifts are shaping our immediate neighborhood. So as I see in today's war, four distinct trends stand out. First one is comprehensive conflict. Every age had its own kind of war, its own limiting conditions, and its own peculiar preconceptions. This Clausewitz proclaimed in 19th century. Today, era of limited war has transformed into an age of comprehensive conflict. Ukraine and Gaza are wars that mobilize entire nations, where societies, industries, and technologies are all drawn into the fight. Op Sindoor too reflected this transformation, where diplomacy, deterrence, and decisive force fused into a single expression of national resolve. The second trend is cycle of adaptation. As wars expand in the scale and complexity, they reaffirm what JFC Fuller once said, the constant tactical factor, that every improvement in weapons soon meets a counter improvement that renders it obsolete. We have seen in Ukraine, precision guided munitions that once promised surgical accuracy was soon blunted by the deep electronic warfare. Similarly, in the case of ratcheting, technology competition of the unmanned aerial system and counter unmanned aerial system. In our case, the first and the fifth generations of warfare, that is trench warfare to AI and quantum, coexist. That's a compulsion for us by virtue of our long land borders. And they also compete with each other for same existing space. The third trend is convergence of capability. This constant race of innovation has also leveled the landscape of war. Technology is leapfrogging beyond the speed of Moore's law, and Unni is sitting here who's advocate of Moore's law, but it is much more crossed beyond that, and has become the great battle space equalizer, transcending through the various domains what we are going to talk about today. And the fourth trend is composition of conflict. The face of war itself has changed as much as its form. Wars today are not just waged by soldiers, but also terrorist groups, militias like the Wagner Group, citizen soldiers like the Ukrainians, and of course the narrative which is in the mind that whether you have won or not. So some of this was also witnessed during the Op Sindhu. So what are the key takeaways? I feel the 5 most relevant key takeaways which I can give for the Indian context include, first, the land itself. As American writer Mark Twain once said, buy land. They are not making it anymore. So from evolving trends of modern warfare, one truth endures: land remains the currency of victory. Unlike other domains where destruction may suffice, land warfare demands destruction, eviction, occupation, and control that is physical, political, and psychological. And the cost of repetition, I would like to recall the recent Alaska conference which took place between the two great leaders, and they talked about exchange of land. Moving ahead to the second is the fallacy of short wars. If land remains the currency of victory, then time remains the true test. We are seeing it in almost every ongoing conflict. The next conflict in our region may be for 4 days, 4 months, or even 4 years. We cannot say for sure. And the third one is military-civil fusion with expanding space for conventional operations. In protected wars, the endurance is national, not just military, as already highlighted by Mr. Anna. Self-reliant defense industrial capabilities are no longer optional. They form the foundation of integrating civilian infrastructure, technology, and emerging concepts of citizen warriors into military strategy. And I just wish to tell you that if you believe in Atmanirbharta, you have the flexibility to change the tenor and the pace of the war by flexibility in your modifications, adaptation, and implementation of the latest technology. Fourth, the calculus of interdependence. Strategic autonomy, once seen as an end in itself, may increasingly evolve into strategic convenience or strategic hedging, where partnerships are shaped not by permanence, but by pragmatism, even opportunism. Few call it, quote-unquote, constructivism. Fifth, conflicts in future war would be multidimensional, but we would do well to remember that all other forms of modern warfare thrive only when backed by potent, precise, and punitive conventional forces. So now let's move on to the new normal of Op Sindoor. Now, before I say anything as to the Op Sindoor is concerned, I would like to put on record, this is the first time that we have the polity, we had a clarity, and which had the confidence on their defense forces, and they said, we give you 100% freedom. Never ever I have seen this kind of a freedom given anywhere in the world. And that is the kind of a synergy, politico-military fusion that makes India so great country today. So as nation confront today shifting landscape, the real test lies not just in capability, but in clarity, how we think about the war itself. In warfare, there is often a temptation either to fight the last war or to suffer from next war itis, the term popularized by former US Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. So the wisdom lies in balancing the two. drawing from experience while anticipating disruption. That balance between legacy and leap is what will define success in the era of constant change. And I'll take your mind back again to the 5 generations of warfare. We are constrained to fight the trench warfare as also leapfrog to artificial intelligence and quantum. So the logical question is, how much is India prepared for or responded? The answer lies in Ops Sindoor. Every facet of modern warfare we discussed was evident in its planning and execution. It was like a rhythmic orchestra wherein all sounds played together in various decibels. To put it in simple words, rifleman to Rashtra, Jawan to Jahan worked in harmony. In just 88 hours, a new chapter was written in the history of warfare. Pakistan was compelled to seek a cessation of hostilities as the operation shattered its illusion of impunity, struck deep into its heartland, including Punjab and Rawalpindi, and punctured the nuclear bogey that had long constrained conventional response. What we achieved through Ops Sindoor was not by coincidence, but by deliberate design, driven by foresight, preparation, and organizational transformation. And the tri-service synergy, which became the strong point and which actually shook up the others, that how can three be so together, so closely working together and in unison. I think that was something phenomenal, and that has given us so much of results. The Indian Army's decade of transformation commenced in 2023 during General Pandey's time to align its structures, doctrines, and mindset with evolving warfare. 2024 and 25 were declared as the years of technology absorption, and the Honorable Raksha Mantri designated 2025 as the year of reforms, affirming that transformation is not an event but a continuum. We have a number of new transformation structures in the making. Some are already out in the news, like Rudra, Bhairav, and so many others. Others will be known later. So Ops Sindoor also revealed a deeper truth about the changing character of war, that modern conflicts can no longer be confined to single domains. The same integration of land, air, cyber, space, information, electronic spectrum, and even the academia and industry, and on special request, now the narrative management system, that is the media, that define Ops Sindoor now points to the future of warfare, that is multi-domain operations. MDO is about creating simultaneity of effects, combining fires, influence, and information faster than adversary can react, also called as OODA loop. We have been working towards for over a year now, and we have had apex level MDO discussions and war games. So we were mentally prepared, and it gave us great dividends towards cross-domain application. So each of these domains merits deep separate discussion, but one fact stands out glaringly. The traditional land domain now integrates and projects across every dimension of technology and terrain. And this terrain includes the low altitude aerial battle space over the battlefield, sometimes called the air littoral. With the air littorals being saturated by the unmanned aerial system and counter-unmanned aerial systems, including the electromagnetic spectrum, the land forces need to find solutions to fully dominate it. As far as India's immediate neighborhood is concerned, India's civilizational vision of Vishwabandhu and Vishwamitra, these are the two aspects which guide us, seeking peace through equilibrium, friendship through strength, and inclusivity through preparedness. However, currently our immediate and extended neighborhood are experiencing some turbulence. Traditional rivalries, new alignments, internal transitions, everything is ongoing. Across South Asia, internal volatility, migration pressures, and external influence. From Myanmar to Bangladesh, from Nepal's Gen Z activism to strategic recalibrations of Sri Lanka and Maldives, create a fluid and a contested environment. In the event of hostilities, we may be officially facing one adversary, but our resource and cognitive stretch would have to be applied in multiple directions. Is it more than 2.5? The answer is yes. So while navigating the uncertainties of VUCA environment, Indian Army ensured trustworthy strategic communication with all our neighbors, that is the military leaders, in a reassuring manner, and will continue to do so in the future too. Just this week, we hosted the first ever conclave of the Army Chiefs of United Nations troop contributing countries, with participation surprisingly from 32 countries from across the globe. This was much more than the expectation. A very well received event with constructive outcomes, wherein almost all our neighboring countries who contribute to the United Nations were present. India and its armed forces will always remain a significant net security provider in not only the immediate but also the extended neighborhood. We need to remain pivotal to any whole of nation approach towards this assurance endeavor. So to conclude, I would say we live in an age of constant conflict and change. Our task is clear: to stay prepared, to stay purposeful, and stay ahead in the evolution of warfare. The Indian military stands ready, lethal in capability, resolute in character, and united in cause. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Jai Hind.
Mr. Arnab Goswami, the Republic TV team, General Dushyant, the Director General of Clause, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. When you were introduced in this manner, you do tend to walk on cloud 9 for the moment. I'm immensely flattered, but I must add here that the Operation Sindoor kind of experience are moments and times that you actually wear the uniform for, and for it to come at the time that it did, for all of us to be associated with it, for me personally to be at the helm of the Military Operations Directorate as the DGMO at that time was providential. But I do want to place on record here that the Indian Army soldier is the best soldier in the world. I have no doubt in my mind about that. The fact that we came out victors at the end of that conflict is in no small measure to the efforts of the Indian Army, to the gallant air warriors, and of course the Indian Navy, which I have repeatedly said also sailed out into the Arabian Sea. The operation itself, ladies and gentlemen, stands as a watershed moment in India's doctrinal evolution. It is an operation that transformed deterrence into compellence and restraint into assertion, and was distinct for its proactive approach and precision. It established India's capacity to apply calibrated military power across multiple domains, while still being in control of the escalation matrix. What was conceptualized as retaliation to cross-border terrorism evolved rapidly into a demonstration of strategic resolve, inter-service synergy, and indigenous technological competence, the cornerstones of India's 21st century statecraft. So what I'm going to do very quickly, we are at the end of a very long day, is speak about some strategic, operational and military lessons. Over the day today, I've seen numerous experts, various distinguished people come here and speak, give out their views. I've also been afforded this opportunity for the second time in a couple of weeks by General Dushyant to speak about this operation, and I'm very grateful for that. There are, of course, suggestions and very compelling ones that come from the experts that we've heard. So I'm going to give you some views. General Raj Shukla spoke as forcefully as he did about disruption. I will just make very brief mentions to that. We've started. Whether it turns out to be disruption in the manner that he foresaw it, time will tell. So first, about strategic lessons. Fundamentally, the operation redefined India's strategic posture. Our previous actions and responses have rested on deterrence and restraint, and everybody's spoken about this. But Sindoor brought to fore a new approach, one that merged operational precision with political clarity. By launching cross line of control and border strikes systematically and daringly, India showed up Pakistan's propensity to exploit the space between subconventional terrorism and war. Terror attacks are now being viewed through a different prism, and I'm obviously referring to the doctrinal changes that the Prime Minister has spoken about, and therefore these will now increasingly not be seen as isolated incidents. The operation challenged the assumption that Pakistan's nuclear arsenal could provide perpetual immunity against punitive Indian actions. By employing long-range precision weapons, ammunition and loitering munition, India exposed the limits of nuclear blackmail, proving that calibrated force can indeed coexist with nuclear stability. Now, I don't know how many of you've been sitting here for the better part of the day, have had occasion to listen to the Pakistan Army Chief's address earlier today I think, at the Pakistan Military Academy at Kakul. And he's yet again spoken about this. And in the tone that he normally does, and he's warned India that there is no space for war when two countries such as India and Pakistan are involved. Now, the very fact that he and the academy in Pakistan repeatedly speak about this aspect suggests to me that we've for once been able to call the bluff, and therefore there is definitely concern on the other side as far as this matter is concerned. Diplomatically, Operation Sindoor consolidated India's strategic sovereignty. India brooked no interference, setting the expectation that cross-border aggression would be met with autonomous, lawful, and proportionate responses. This framework enhanced our credibility while simultaneously forcing our adversaries to recalibrate their assumptions. Strategically, the operation underscored the necessity for theatre-level integration. The Ministry of Defence and the service headquarters functioned cohesively during the limited operation, but future multi-domain conflicts will demand unified theatre commands, and much has been said and written about it, much has been said today also, capable of sustained multi-space operations across the land, air, sea, cyber and space domains. General Manoj Pandey, I heard him speak earlier today. He was on the panel with Air Chief Marshal Rakesh Bhaduria, and they had a discussion on this. I completely echo the sentiments of General Manoj Pandey. The structures are already in place. Whether or not you want to tweak them or modify them because you learned certain lessons during Operation Sindoor, and I have my views on that, because at the end of the day it was a limited operation. That's a call that you can take. But to get into a regressive mode and say that now this process is not relevant anymore, well, I think we would do that at our own peril. And I think General Raj Shukla's views in the panel earlier today were very telling. Now, to some operational lessons, ladies and gentlemen. A defining strength of Operation Sindoor was the synchronization of the political will and military planning and execution. Objectives were realistic, unambiguous, and proportionate. And I think I can vouch for this because I was in the engine room when all the planning was taking place. And the flexibility that was afforded to the armed forces has been much spoken about. And I can vouch for that again. The aim to target and neutralize terror infrastructure, avoid escalation, and yet be prepared for third, fourth, and fifth order effects was not only planned but achieved through effective command coordination and operational discipline. The operation validated India's advances in C4 ISR integration. The precise strikes was supported by a synergized intelligence plan that included satellite images and joint targeting data shared across domains, shortening the sensor to shooter loop activity. However, Again referring to the panel earlier, General Shukla spoke about the space aspect. We need much more in this regard, ladies and gentlemen. I've had occasion to attend certain meetings of our space program as part of the governing body council. I'm a member of that. We are making progress. ISRO is, one of our finest agencies, and hopefully, in times to come, we will be nearer to the capability that we are seeking in this regard. Operational design emphasizes surprise, momentum, and proportionality. Ladies and gentlemen, as I got ready to come and attend the seminar today, I was doing some work at home. One of my daughters lives in Delhi. I see her occasionally. She's married. And coincidentally, on the night on which the strikes were planned, as I moved out late at night out of my house, and that was part of the whole surprise plan, she happened to be in the house that day. And when she came to learn that I was going to speak on Operation Sindoor today, she reminded me of that day. Surprise was such that if I was to tell you that the 2-star generals, and we have 2 of them in the Military Operations Directorate, till a couple of hours before the strikes went in, were not aware of the time on target. While they knew that the strikes were planned, they weren't exactly aware as to when these strikes would go in. So therefore, that's the kind of surprise that we were looking to achieve. Coordinations and rehearsals that we carried out with other government agencies, such as air drills, blackouts. I think we just had to sound the Home Ministry, the Home Secretary. Everybody was on board, and I think that whole environment managed to create that momentum that we were looking for. And I think that's one of the key areas because of which we were able to achieve surprise. The employment of precision weapons and munitions and indigenous vectors allowed deep and accurate penetration against terror hubs while alleviating the problem of collateral damage. I think some of those pictures and videos that you've seen where the munition has gone right through the roof will tell you what I'm speaking about. Escalation was managed through a controlled release of information and maintenance of a communication channel with the Pakistan Army. And when I say this, I'm obviously referring to the DGMO's hotline, which at that time and which at most times is the only channel of communication that exists between the 2 countries. Operation Sindoor marked the first operational deployment of loiter munitions, which revealed both the potential and some drawbacks of these vectors. Future conflicts will demand robust counter-drone measures and swarm coordination systems. Tactical drones with frontline units and integrated anti-UAS grids have thus become doctrinal imperatives, an area that is now being addressed through structural changes in our fighting arms. Earlier this year, you would have heard the Chief of Army Staff speak from Dras, from the Kargil War Memorial, on the Kargil Vijay Divas. That was at the end of July. And he announced that day about the structural changes that we were going ahead and carrying out. I must tell you here today that many of those now are on the verge of completion. I will not label those as disruptions because right now the scale that we are doing that cannot be categorized as that. However, I think you'll bear with me and with us when I say that these have to be validated. We have to test these. But tomorrow, if we were to have another edition of Operation Sindoor, and the Chief of Army Staff has also spoken about that, you could well have these newer structures swing into action for the roles that they have been designed for. We've got one of our co-commanders sitting here from the Western Front, and maybe over a cup of tea you could ask him. And I think these are fast getting ready. Our procedures are such that equipment does take a while to come in, but there are many measures that we are taking at our formation levels to ensure that these newer units and structures are actually empowered to carry out the role that they're designed for. The enemy's use of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation highlighted the emergence of information and perception warfare as a decisive front. While we successfully countered false narratives through unified communications across the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, and media outlets, but the episode reinforced that perception management must be pre-planned and that there is a certain investment that you need to make in this regard. And there is yet some thought and work that is required in this area. Over lunch, I was speaking with Arnab about this, and therefore, this is an area that we could spend more time and effort on. Military lessons. While the Army, Navy, and Air Force achieved unprecedented coordination during Operation Sindoor, the operation did highlight the strategic necessity of theatre commands. Future conflicts will, in all probability, not afford the flexibility of siloed methods. Silos were earlier spoken about in a different manner though. That may have been employed on occasion during Operation Sindoor, especially if the threat emerges simultaneously on either one of our contested borders. Indigenous technology, missiles, EW suits, drones, communication networks, these were core success enablers. Homegrown C4 ISR I have spoken about ensured data integrity, strategic autonomy, and rapid responsiveness. The operation thus validated the fact that technological sovereignty, and Ajay Chandpuria spoke about this earlier, I heard his address, is now synonymous with strategic security. The Indian military demonstrated that compellence can be exercised within calibrated thresholds. This new escalation ladder allows management of intensity levels that are commensurate to objectives. And I think that probably will answer, a lot of maybe naysayers, possibly not correct to call them that, who often come and ask me or many others as to, did we stop at the right time? An essential shift from deterrence to active coercion while retaining moral and legal legitimacy. As India faces blended threats, terrorism, cyber attacks, misinformation, and conventional war, the Operation Sindoor model does offer an adaptable framework. General Manoj Pandey said earlier, I think he was sounding a little or putting up a little red flag that conflicts such as these, we should not be hasty in drawing our lessons. And therefore, one such, that theaterization is now no more required. It would be hasty to say that. And, the Chief of Army Staff earlier spoke about the currency of land warfare, the occupation of territory. So wars will still continue to be defined by capture of territory, and especially so with the two peculiar adversaries that we have. So hence the primacy of land operations has not only been underscored yet again, but will remain relevant for all times to come. Another important lesson has been that of control of airspace or the air littoral. I think Air Marshals Diptendu and my friend General Sumer Dikuna will be speaking about this. So I will not dwell on this. But it did emerge in the few days, especially after hostilities had been ceased and when the Pak Army violated and launched a large number of drones across the borders in LC, that the control and ability to detect and destroy these must rest with the commander of this battle space on ground, which is the Corps Commander. In this regard, we may need to review existing command and control arrangements and formulate newer methods and procedures, as also amend and change the distances that define this airspace to enable a swift and cogent response and action to any attempted violations. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, Operation Sindoor will be remembered not only for its tactical brilliance, but for redesigning India's strategic orientation. It affirmed that national resolve, backed by institutional integration and indigenous innovation, can ensure success in very complex and vexing operational situations. The greatest legacy of this operation lies in its clarity, the affirmation that India will act with precision, purpose, and proportionality. The next step lies in translating these lessons into enduring structures, formal doctrines, functional theatre commands, and permanent multi-domain readiness. Operation Sindoor is also symbolic on multiple levels. It represents confidence in controlled escalation, deterring through demonstrated capacity to act without fear of consequence. It signals India's will to define, not adhere to externally imposed or perceivable thresholds. It also sets a benchmark for how dime instruments converge to achieve strategic aims in contested environments. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, now to open our first panel on this conclave, that is on learning from global conflicts. We are privileged to have a special panel address on India's place in a rapidly changing world order. And it is our honor to welcome Lieutenant General Devendra Sharma, Param Vishishta Seva Medal, Ati Vishishta Seva Medal, Sena Medal, General Officer Commanding in Chief, Army Training Command, that is the R-Track.
A distinguished officer with nearly 4 decades of service, General Sharma has been recognized for gallantry, outstanding command and transformative leadership. At the helm of Army Training Command, he's shaping and training modernization and future readiness of India's land forces. From his early days as a Sword of Honor recipient, alumnus of Mayo College, NDA, IMA, to commissioning into the Sindh Horse in 1987, his career reflects dedication, innovation, and strategic foresight.
And before we invite him to the stage, let us just take a moment to view a short audiovisual highlighting his journey and his vision.
In the annals of military history, there are leaders who train soldiers, and then there are leaders who transform the way a nation prepares for war and peace. Lieutenant General Devendra Sharma, General Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Shimla-based Army Training Command, embodies that transformation.
जहां तक R-Track का कंट्रीब्यूशन है, हमारा कंट्रीब्यूशन है सक्षम और लेस ट्रेनिंग देना तमाम इंडियन आर्मी पर्सनल को, ताकि वो अपना ऑपरेशनल मिशन पूरी तरीके से सक्सेसफुली कर सके.
A Sword of Honor recipient, an alumnus of Mayo College, NDA and IMA, commissioned into the Sindh Horse in 1987, General Sharma has spent nearly 4 decades in service to the nation. For his exemplary service, he has been awarded the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal and Sena Medal, a testament to leadership rooted in excellence. As head of Army Training Command, Lieutenant General Sharma has led a new wave of modernization, integrating 33 advanced technologies into the Army's training doctrine by 2030, infusing experience with innovation.
हमने 33 टेक्नोलॉजीज आइडेंटिफाई किए हैं, जिससे हमने नीश टेक्नोलॉजीज, कंटेम्प्रेरी टेक्नोलॉजी से हमने अपने ट्रेनिंग में शामिल करना है. इसको मुहिम देने के लिए हमने 14 कैटेगरी ए एस्टैब्लिशमेंट्स को सेंटर्स ऑफ एक्सपर्टीज बना दिया है इन टेक्नोलॉजीज के.
He's redefining readiness, preparing soldiers not just for today's battlefield, but for the battlefields of the future. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Devendra Sharma, BVSM, AVSM, SM.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Lieutenant General Devendra Sharma for his special panel address on India's place in a rapidly changing world order.
Mr. Arnab Goswami, Founder, Chairman, and Editor-in-Chief of Republic Media Network, General Dushyant, DG Claus, Padma Bhushan Sri Baba Kalyani, Chairman of the Kalyani Group, General Manoj Pandey, former Chief of the Army Staff, Air Chief Marshal Bhaduria, former Air Chief, serving senior officers, our most respected veterans, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First, I'm delighted to be here in your midst in this galaxy of senior officers, senior representatives, to share my views. I must thank the organizers for this most generous introduction that has been given for me. And I want to compliment the Republic Media Network for this initiative of Forces First. I'm conscious that there is a time overrun by about an hour, so I'll optimize 5 minutes and I will close down in about 15 minutes, and therefore I will stick to my script. It is indeed a matter of honor and a privilege for me to deliver this Republic Special Panel Address 1 of the seminar Living in the Era of Global Conflicts on the topic India's Place in the Rapidly Changing World Order. Now, we live in a time of multipolarity, contestation, and fragmentation, which is characterized by economic and technological reconfigurations. The established post-Cold War certainties are giving way to a more multipolar and complex world, defined by new power dynamics, technological acceleration, and profound global challenges. The metrics of power, victory, and truth are being upended. This makes the question of India's role in the new global order especially relevant. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I shall elaborate on just two issues. First is the geopolitical flux that defines the new world order. I will only keep to 8 pointers in this regard. And second, India's place in this emerging new world order. The dominant theme in the world order today is the strategic competition between the US and China. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990, the US enjoyed a unipolar moment for almost 2 decades, when it dominated the world economically, geopolitically, militarily, and technologically. The American unipolar movement is now declining. We see increasing multipolarity. Aspiring nations, regional blocs are asserting their influence. China has slowly but surely supplanted the United States' industrial and manufacturing predominance in both scale and pace. However, the US position on China remains unclear. While President Trump wishes to assert his influence on China, he finds his strategic choices hemmed in by trade, supply of rare earth elements, the huge manufacturing leverage enjoyed by China, and most significantly, the $730 billion worth of US Treasury bonds held by China. In the backdrop of the evolving relationship between US and China, other global relations are also evolving. Russia and China have made common cause against the US, but it will remain a transactional arrangement, a marriage of convenience, if you please. Because Russia will not accept a junior power status in this arrangement, while China, on the other hand, would want the relationship to reflect the extant power differential. Russia and the European Union had a chance to reimagine their relationship a few decades ago, but the European Union aligned with the US, which resulted in an adversarial position against Russia, which has brought things to a head today. concomitant with the changes, that is strategic competition between the US and China, evolving global relation between other principles, we find that hyper-nationalism reigns supreme. The UK, a founder member of the European Union, is in Brexit mode, privileging its national interests over collective prosperity. Mr. Donald Trump came to office for his second term, riding on the promise to make America great again. There's also a coinciding rise of ultra-conservative leaders across the globe who are riding hyper-nationalism as their primary credo. In the evolving world order, we also find there are shifting alliances based on perceived national interests. Every nation strategically aligns based on their respective national interests at that point of time without prejudice to their earlier alliances. There is enough evidence to suggest national interest remains supreme, which has resulted in a phenomena of shifting alliances. In this evolving world order, we also find that the character of war is changing. This is exemplified by the Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas drone strikes on Israel, exemplifying the use of disruptive technologies while also demonstrating how non-state actors can influence global politics and destabilize regional balances overnight. Another pointer in the changing character war is the launching of a sensational 11-day war by Israel on Iran, targeting its top leadership and crippling its nuclear program, which was followed by a transcontinental strike by the United States in the form of Op Midnight Hammer. Although wars in the 21st century were predicted to be short, sharp, and intense, we find that the Ukraine war today has entered its 1,332nd day. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also witnessing a breakdown of global institutions that were mandated to maintain and balance and harmony in the world. World peace-enabling organizations are unable to control the ongoing conflicts in the world. Organizations that were mandated to regulate trade disagreements find them at a loss to achieve their mandate. Closer in our regional neighborhood, we find an upheaval in the form of regime changes perpetrated by mass movements. Since May 22, almost our entire neighborhood has been convulsed by regime changes. Pakistan underwent riots in May 22. While popular movements dislodged governments in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and most recently in Nepal in September of 25. Myanmar, of course, is undergoing a period of serious civil strife since 2021. In all this upheaval, India stands tall as an inclusive, vibrant democracy, a stable nation with strong fundamentals and a trusted ally in the region. In the regional context of South Asia, there is the issue of China-Pakistan relationship that is increasingly being called into question. The China-Pakistan relationship is a most unnatural relationship, considering that the two countries are rooted in different political ideologies. They represent different ethnic, religious, cultural, and linguistic orientations. China is number 2 and Pakistan is number 40 in the nominal GDP rankings in the world. The $22.4 billion trade between the two countries is heavily skewed in favor of China, which accounts for $19.6 billion. Clearly, this is not a relationship of equals. Despite these evident divergences, there exists a strong relationship between the two countries today. The question that intrigues us is, who needs whom more? We can debate on both sides of the issue. However, the issue needs to be seen keeping the following pointers in mind. China perhaps relies on Pakistan for leveraging support from the Organization of Islamic Countries and the Arab world. China needs access to the Arabian Sea to mitigate its Malacca dilemma and secure her energy needs. Relationships with Pakistan also help address concerns in Xinjiang and security of the CPEC assets. I have just given 8 pointers on the evolving world order. I think the time has now come for me to refocus to see what is India's place in this evolving new world order. History bears testimony to the fact that India has done well whenever the world order has been in a flux. We gained independence as a result of global turbulence in the wake of the Second World War. After the Soviet Union imploded, we lost a strategic partner, yet 2 decades later, India was punching much above her weight. Today's world order thus offers us an opportunity that we must navigate with agility, with clarity, and with national interest. India is an ancient civilization, but one of the youngest democracies in the world. During the Cold War, we used the non-aligned movement to exist between 2 power blocs. Today, however, we are seeking to shape the space between the 2 power blocs. India is not confined to the binary of any set of relations, but is navigating an increasingly networked world while upholding national interests and universal principles with equal fervor. India's unique status is today contributed by strong standing across several domains. India has some significant strengths that we must leverage to be a global principle in the evolving world order. Some issues for consideration are: to start with, India has a huge demographic dividend. India is the most populous country since 2023, with a median age significantly lower than its peers. By 2047, India's population will peak at 1.6 billion and stabilize. What is most important is that these numbers are propelled by the confident foundational strength of our democracy. In 2024, 64.64 crore voters out of the registered 96.88 crore voters participated in the general elections, which were conducted to an accuracy of sigma 6x with an error percentage of 0.0038%. Second, India has economic resilience and growth momentum. India's nominal GDP stands at $4.19 trillion at market exchange rates, and number 4 in the world. We stand at number 3 in terms of purchasing power parity. The pace and scale of our growth is indeed inspiring. Of our 4 trillion economy, the first trillion came to us in 67 years. The second trillion came in 8 years. The third trillion came in 5 years. And the fourth trillion came in 5 years, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The World Bank and others forecast India maintaining the fastest growth rates globally amongst large economies in the near term at about 6.3%, even when global growth is muted. Another key strength is our services sector and digital strength. The services sector accounts for about 50% of India's GDP. Today, digitization is so entrenched in India that a citizen can open a bank account in less than 5 minutes. A MSME can get a loan in less than an hour, and a new company can register in less than 72 hours. Our startup ecosystem, fintech, digital payments, IT exports are globally competitive. We are ranked number 3 globally in unicorns and world number 2 in startups. India has a prime geostrategic location and a commanding presence in the maritime domain. India controls a central position in the Indian Ocean. We lie at the intersection of East, West, and Central Asia. Its maritime domain is vital because the sea lanes of communication in the Indian Ocean are amongst the most critical in the world, which account for 70% of the world container traffic, and 50% of the daily global oil consumption. If 1947 gave us political freedom, 2047 must signify India's emergence as a fully transformed nation, economically, socially, and strategically. By 2047, India should be a credible and confident great power, reflecting both civilizational stature and its economic heft across multiple domains: diplomacy, defense, climate, and normative leadership. We should strive for institutional roles, a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council, leadership in institutional reforms, and shape the agenda in the global challenges such as climate, data integrity, and trade. As a global player, India will have to possess power projection capabilities in the Indian Ocean and potentially beyond. But we will have to ensure that this is achieved without overextension, because imperial overreach has been the bane of many aspiring powers. Strategic autonomy must remain central to our strategy. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the world is in a flux, illustrated by significant events that have altered the world order. Historically, India has done well when the world order has been in a flux. Today, we stand at a critical juncture, and India must leverage her strengths to be globally relevant. How India has leveraged her current position is vindicated by a few pointers. As tensions between the US and China intensify, India's strategic posturing as a stable democracy and growing economic power has enhanced our global relevance. Supply chain diversification and China Plus One strategy has driven manufacturing and investment opportunities towards India. India has balanced her foreign policy, maintaining strategic autonomy while deepening ties with major powers. India's growing role as a voice of the global South has further increased her diplomatic heft, as seen during her presidency of the G20. Economic resilience, technological innovation, and a young workforce have positioned it as a preferred partner in global trade, digital infrastructure, and green transitions. In essence, India has turned uncertainty into opportunity, leveraging geopolitical turbulence to expand her influence, secure strategic space, and strengthen its pathway towards becoming a leading global power. I wish to close my talk with the following few lines. Let us anchor our policies in data, but orient our ambitions in values. Let us build capacities now so that our strategic autonomy is real. Let us not merely adapt to the new world order, but help redesign the new world order. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you to Lieutenant General Devendra Sharma for that insightful and comprehensive address, which sets the stage for today's discussions on global conflict, strategy, and India's evolving role in the world order. At this point, sir, I'd like to request our Republic TV senior editor, Shavan Sen, to kindly come up on stage and felicitate General Devendra Sharma. Thank you, sir, for that speech.
Environment, and we are privileged to be joined by a leader whose vision, courage, and command define India's maritime strength. Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Yuddha Seva Medal, Director General, Naval Operations.
A distinguished naval aviator and expert in communications and electronic warfare, Admiral Pramod has commanded frontline warships, naval air stations, and has held key operational and staff appointments. From leading India's response post-Galwan to shaping maritime strategy in the Indo-Pacific, his career exemplifies strategic foresight and operational excellence. To give us a glimpse of his remarkable journey and contributions, may we now View a short audiovisual on Vice Admiral Pramod.
The calm sea hides 1,000 warheads.
And it's a privilege to invite Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod to the stage. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join us in welcoming Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod.
May I thank the organizers for a well-made introductory video on the Navy and self. It makes my job, the current tasks, simpler. Former, I think, chiefs left. Mr. Arnab Goswami, DG Clause, distinguished guests from various ministries, defense forces, strategic community, scientists, academia, industry partners, friends from friendly foreign countries, and media, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to you all. At the outset, let me convey my sincere gratitude to Clause and Republic team for organizing this enriching Forces First Conclave and for providing me an opportunity to speak on this subject of enduring relevance. I would like to reiterate what General Sharma just highlighted about the maritime domain. Our nation's economic progress is inextricably linked to the maritime domain, which serves as the lifeline of our trade, energy security, and strategic outreach. Over 90% of India's trade by volume and 77% by value, and nearly all of our energy imports transit through the seas. The oceans therefore are not distant frontiers. They are vital areas of our national prosperity. However, in recent times, the oceans have emerged as a mirror of the world's complexities, open, interconnected, yet increasingly contested. Before I dwell deeper into how the Indian Navy safeguards the national and regional maritime interests, it may be important to underscore that India's maritime interests are wide-ranging and are vital to our national progress. At their core, they encompass protection of India's sovereignty and territorial integrity against threats emanating from or through the maritime domain. Safety and security of trade and commerce, which form the backbone of our economic growth and global engagement. And the pursuit of peace, stability, and security in our areas of maritime interests. These interests collectively define India's maritime outlook and guide Indian Navy's efforts. Over the next few minutes, I shall endeavor to elaborate on the complex operational environment in the Indian Ocean region and the actions of Indian Navy to safeguard our national maritime interests. The Indian Ocean is the world's maritime lifeline upon which the prosperity and security of many nations rest. Spanning nearly 70 million square kilometers, it connects Africa, West Asia, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Every day, nearly 3/4 of global oil and LNG passes through these waters. Half of the world's container traffic depends on safe passage through the choke points in the Indian Ocean region. With nearly 160,000 ships transiting through it annually, the Indian Ocean region plays a pivotal role in shaping the global economy. India's central position in the IOR, astride the main international shipping lanes, thus accords inherent advantages. It places the outer fringes of Indian Ocean region and most choke points almost equidistant from India, thereby facilitating reach, sustenance, and mobility of our maritime forces across the region. Closer home, a coastline of over 11,090 kilometers and an exclusive economic zone of 2.4 million square kilometers provides us with resources, opportunities, and responsibilities. With 12 major and 217 non-major ports, our economy is directly dependent on the maritime trade. Today, the Indian Ocean is a contested, congested, and competitive space which directly impacts India. A case in point is the situation in West Asia. The manifestation of Israel-Hamas conflict in the maritime domain resulted in the Houthis resorting to attacks on merchant trade transiting through Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. In essence, instability in the land domain has corresponding effects over the maritime domain and vice versa. Therefore, it would be worthwhile to first understand the key takeaways of recent conflicts. Starting with Russia-Ukraine war, it clearly busted the myth of a short and intense war in modern times. The large-scale use of missiles, drones, loiter munitions, and one-way attack UAVs, and demonstration of simultaneous multi-domain operations are few of the new advances in warfare. Long-range precision targeting has become one of the new normals to degrade adversaries' war-waging capability. We also noticed that nations have been directly supporting the warring parties in terms of supply of niche platforms, arms, weapons, and personnel without being designated as belligerent themselves. In such a scenario, important questions arise about the ability of global institutions like the UN to respond effectively to the evolving security challenges. Next is the Israel-Hamas Hezbollah-Houthi-Iran conflict, which serves as a prime example of the use of state-sponsored proxies towards achieving asymmetric gains. Targeting of senior political leaderships and military leadership has been excised as one of the strategic options, a fashion of a sort. Moreover, the spillover of the conflict into the maritime domain, with the Houthis disrupting major trades, has once again brought to fore the criticality of protection of trade and commerce. The easy access to high-tech technology, including uncrewed systems and cyber tools by the non-state actors, coupled with hybrid warfare techniques, raises serious security concerns for the future. Consequent to this, in the last 2 years, we have witnessed increasing presence of extra-regional forces and multilateral constructs in the IOR in an effort to protect their maritime interests. The maritime forces of the US and European Union have maintained a continuous presence, particularly in West Asia, including through the deployment of US carrier strike groups. You would have also noticed in the last 2 years that we have seen, other than the US carrier strike group, the Charles de Gaulle carrier strike group, it was followed with the Italian Cavo carrier strike group, and thereafter now Prince of Wales strike groups was in the Indian Ocean region, operating in the Indian Ocean region. Operations such as Prosperity Guardian under Combined Maritime Forces and Operation Aspidis under European Naval Forces are in response to the fragile and volatile situation in the region. This also testifies the versatility and ability of a potent naval force with a high weapon density to control and dominate choke points and major trade routes. In addition, nuclear submarines capable of carrying sizable number of land attack missiles operating in tandem provides added lethality. We just talked about Operation Midnight Hammer, which saw, other than the B-2 bombers, 30 tomahawks fired by an Ohio-class submarine at the Iranian nuclear facilities, serves as a prime example of the ability of naval platforms to influence affairs on land from sea. By the way, the Ohio-class missile carries 154 Tomahawk missiles. That is the kind of weapon density you have in one naval platform. Coming specifically to the threats in the maritime domain for India, these can be considered as traditional and non-traditional. In the traditional domain, Pakistan remains the primary threat. It continues to employ terror as an instrument of state policy, whilst aggressively developing conventional capabilities in the maritime domain despite economic constraints. May I also take this opportunity to highlight the Indian Navy's proactive response during Op Sindoor. The operation reaffirmed the readiness and capability of the Indian Navy as a combat-ready, credible, cohesive, and future-ready force. As the operation unfolded, the Vikrant carrier battle group, supported by destroyers, frigates, fleet tankers, integral air assets, and submarines, including assets augmented from the Eastern Naval Command and the Southern Naval Commands, took the center stage. Most deployed assets were indigenous, which performed exceptionally well and were stood to deliver precise ordnance on targets. The forward deployed Indian fleet, with its ability to launch long-range missiles against the selected targets ashore, lent the entire posture its most telling weight. The kinetic action by the defense forces, coupled with the sheer fear of strikes on Karachi by iron platforms, compelled Pakistan to request India for an urgent ceasefire on 10th May. This also validated Indian Navy's strategy of compellence. The operation underscored India's ability to punish perpetrators of the incident in a manner never seen before and retain the escalation control through a synergized approach between the defense forces. Speaking of extra-regional actors in the IOR, these actors seek to expand their influence and shape the evolving maritime order. Under the garb of cooperative initiatives such as anti-piracy patrols, maritime security exercises, scientific research, maritime logistics support, these actors have gradually established a pattern of sustained deployment in the region. Their growing investments in maritime projects as well as deployment of maritime assets reflect a long-time strategic interest in the IOR. For India, whose economic and energy security is closely tied to a free and open Indian Ocean, such trends warrant persistent monitoring and a calibrated strategy. To effectively address these threats, the Navy transitioned into mission-based deployments in areas of interest across the Indian Ocean region to maintain continuous presence and proactively respond to all evolving security situations. As part of this construct, the naval assets are deployed near critical assets, including in the Indian Ocean region. These deployments have enabled iron ships to remain on station and be ready to respond to contingencies across the entire spectrum of operations, ranging from humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to countering maritime terrorism and piracy. Beyond responding to such challenges, these deployments have also enhanced IRN's maritime domain awareness and facilitated regular interaction with friendly foreign countries during the operational turnarounds. Beyond traditional threats, non-traditional threats such as terrorism, piracy, robbery, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, human, arms, drug trafficking have necessitated the Indian Navy to adapt and create fresh paradigms for maritime security. To give you a perspective on the efforts to fight such threats, the Indian Navy has been conducting anti-piracy missions since 2008. These deployments have successfully thwarted over 40 piracy-related incidents, contributing significantly to the maritime safety in the region. As articulated earlier, since October 2023, Gulf of Aden and Red Sea witnessed attacks on merchant vessels by the Houthis. Concomitantly, a rise in piracy incidents off the east coast of Somalia were also observed. To counter the growing threat to trade, IN conducted maritime security operations and deployed more than 30 warships with integral helicopters, marine commandos, and specialist explosive ordnance disposal teams in the identified areas. In the ensuing deployments, IN has successfully thwarted 30 piracy incidents from October 23 to June 24, including apprehension of 62 pirates. Probably we are the only Navy which have apprehended 62 pirates in the Indian Ocean, any pirates in the Indian Ocean region. The key tenets guiding the Indian Navy's maritime posture are versatility in terms of graded response to developing situations, global reach, credible deterrence capability, power projection, ability to protect seaborne trade and commerce, and assert our influence in our areas of maritime interest. Moving forward, the Indian Navy remains steadfast in its commitment to the tri-services synergy, guided by the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Jai, jointness, Atmanirbharta, and innovation. These pillars not only shape our operational philosophy, but also drive our transformation into a modern, self-reliant, and technology-enabled maritime force. As you may be aware, the Indian Navy is already a builder's navy. With the induction of indigenous SSBNs, we have also reinforced the nuclear triad. 53 ships are presently being built in our shipyards. Moreover, our pursuit of Atmanirbharta goes beyond the platforms to the subcomponent level. To conclude, the Indian Navy as the primary manifestation of India's maritime power remains steadfast in our endeavour to be a combat-ready, credible, cohesive and future-ready force capable of protecting India's maritime interests anytime, anywhere, anyhow. I am certain that through our collective vision, innovation and resolve, we will continue to strengthen India's maritime power and contribute towards realizing the national aspiration of a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. Shamno Varna, Jai Hind, and Happy Diwali to you all. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vice Admiral Pramod. I request you to kindly stay on stage, sir, as I welcome on stage our senior editor, Shravan Sen, to kindly felicitate Vice Admiral Pramod. Thank you, Vice Admiral.
And gentlemen, our next panel delves into the complexities of multi-domain warfare, a reality where land, sea, air, cyber and space domains converge, and conflicts are decided not just by troops but by technology, by information and strategy. And to open this panel, we are privileged to have Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, GOC in C11 Corps, a commander whose career blends frontline operational mastery with strategic foresight.
Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria has commanded frontline formations in some of the most challenging terrains along India's borders and has extensive experience in information and psychological operations. To give us a glimpse of his leadership and operational excellence, may we first view a short audio-visual highlighting his career and key operations.
In the high-altitude corridors of vigilance, where every step is tested by terrain and terror, he commands with a vision that blends battlefield mastery with strategic diplomacy. Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, GOC of Vajra Corps, a commander who has led from the front, thwarted multiple infiltration attempts. Under his leadership as Dagger Division Commander, the Corps executed Operation Mrityunjay, stopping infiltrators in the Uri sector in treacherous terrain.
Based on multiple credible inputs from various sources that included military intelligence, Jammu Kashmir Police and our own sources on ground, yesterday we have foiled an infiltration bid in the area of Kamal Kot in Uri sector from Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, in which a total of 3 foreign terrorists have been neutralized, along with recovery of assault weapons and ammunition as is displayed in front of you.
During Operation Sindoor, the Vajra Corps under the steadfast command of Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria held an unyielding front along the LOC. The infiltration attempt of 8-9 November was swiftly repelled, reaffirming the Vajra front's strength and India's deterrence. When floods ravaged Punjab, the Vajra Corps under his command became the lifeline of the people, aiding Operation Rahat with unmatched efficiency and compassion. Through Operation Sindoor and Operation Rahat, the Vajra Corps under Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria exemplified the whole of nation approach and military-civil fusion, uniting forces, civil agencies and citizens in purpose. From frontline operations to being appointed as first resident defense attaché of India accredited to South Korea, his career is defined by operational mastery and strategic foresight. Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria, AVSM, VSM, guiding the Vajra Corps with courage, precision and unwavering resolve, safeguarding our frontiers every single day.
And please join us in welcoming Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuria to the stage as he delivers his special panel address on multi-domain operations, a new way of warfighting.
Sri Arnab Goswami, if I may call the CNC of the Republic Media Network, General Dushyant, DG Claus, ladies and gentlemen, it's a matter of great delight for Operational Commander to be present at such an innovative and a unique event. I think our compliments for the very endeavor and the intent behind this. He shared the anecdote, I think, during the talk with Mr. Parikar, and I was uniquely lucky that I was the first defense attaché to South Korea for a little over 4 years, and as a colonel had a weekly interaction with then Defense Minister Parikar. That was the level of the involvement, and I think the vision that he has, we were really at a loss when he went away, but I am glad that we see the realization of this vision now. So what I shall endeavor is over the next few minutes to give you a visual and an anecdotal account into the address of this topic for the panel discussion 2, which is multi-domain operations. Is it a new way of war fighting? So from the trenches of history to terminals of today, the battlefield has changed. However, the purpose has not. Multi-domain operations do not replace men with machines. Rather, the intent is to unite the mind, the matter, and the mission. So is it even a new way of war fighting, or is it an evolved or a revolutionary way of evolution that we are seeing now? We shall endeavor to analyze that over the next few minutes. Next. Much has been said on the conundrum of war fighting as it is obtaining, but if you see geoeconomics driving geostrategy now, and from the first speaker, the number of conflicts, as you see, have just gone up to 110 from 30 odd major ones which were covered earlier. But if I may just take your attention to the left top, wherein says we are seeing a unipolar world in the military sense, or maybe bipolar in the economic sense, a multipolar in the political sense, and many polar in technology sense. The stakeholder there of state to non-state, others, if you see supranational, Nvidia with $4 trillion of revenues beats the GDP of more than 80 countries across the world. If you see on the right side, democratization of technology, and Mr. Baba Kalyani spoke of weaponization of not trade, but all resources. The commercial of the shelf availability of hostile technology to even a single lone wolf. The cost of attack vis-a-vis cost of defense. The strategic implications of tactical operations given the battlefield transparency, and the importance of influence operations cannot be overemphasized. On the left bottom, the drivers. We have talked about the leaders, the societal fissures, the need for resource control, and the rapidly changing strategic alignments. So all in all, what we are seeing are blurred boundaries, and I think it was spoken about the decade of militarization. So this issue of comprehensive conflict spanning across all 5 generations of warfare. Next, please. As it comes closer home, I think Operation Sindoor, I need not dwell on the individual aspects, attributes. There is a separate session for that. But to give you the perspective, who could have imagined that in a developed state like Punjab, the markets were all open, the economy was in full flow, the schools and the colleges had their exams on, the farming and cultivation, harvesting was just starting, and yet you had issues of missiles and drones flying overhead. From network-centric warfare to network-centric operations, I think what we saw was manifestation of the end or end-based operations. What you are wanting to see in terms of the objectives from the network-controlled operations. You saw manifestation of hard, soft, and smart. And if I may say, a little evolved form of sharp power in the entire totality in that objective which was set here. Next. Yeah. So it was manifestation of a transformative multi-domain operations given the overall politico-military aim which was set for this operation. In 22 minutes and 88 hours, I think the accomplishments are unparalleled if you go into the number of targets which were engaged and all. A lot of you are aware of it, and that I think will be covered subsequently. So in the three-front war, when we talk of it, whether it is the principal adversary we talk of it, collusivity angle, the internal security or the rare area security within the country, and the half dimension of information warfare or perception management, I think all of us are looking at three-dimensional warfare. So what is the essence of multi-domain operations? Next. If you see, earlier command and control was hierarchical, now it is real-time fusion. The manifestation was quite visible. The OODA loop, instead of segmented, is continuous and shortened. The planning, instead of linear and sequential, is shifting from battlefield to battle space. The domain of physical and positional now is maneuver and simultaneous, and this maneuver is not on physical domain, is more on the cognitive domain, if I may say. The operations were deeply planned and predictive, now they are dynamic and overlapping. The concentration led to attrition and territory, whereas it is now cognitive and temporal. The means were platform centric, and now we are going from network to effect centric operations. Information, as it was covered by the previous, I think in one of the Q&A sessions by the former army chief, was a supporting action. Now it almost holds the decisive edge in multi-domain operations. Earlier, there were limitations of technology. But now when we talk of multi-domain operations, they are enabled by the niche technologies of AI, others, the performance enhancing materials, the communication, identification, targeting, manufacturing, logistics, and what have you. And in the midst of this is the human. Next. Multi-domain operations remains a national effort. For these afford, in an environment of collapsing boundaries and domains with fluid battle spaces, one mission, many means, one mind, many dimensions, thereby generating immense or infinite possibilities of what permutation combinations can be adopted in order to achieve the objectives. We need to skill, know, understand, and endeavor. The objective is not in terms of just physical or an attribute, it is more to do with the mind. The battle space from extreme of non-contact, non-kinetic to the other extreme of contact kinetic, the aim is to win the war before the war. If forced into contact kinetic, the endeavor is to have victory with less or least casualties in the earliest possible time frame. So is it at all new to military or Indian military, if I may say? Those of you who would recall 1971 operations for Dhaka, a strength of 3,000 Indian soldiers caused the capitulation of over 30,000 Pakistani soldiers guarding the then capital of East Pakistan. The war, 13 days. So multi-domain operations are not new. But what is new to that? We will cover. Operation Sindoor, I am sure all of us are very familiar. We had battle-proven structures. They continue to evolve in their design. Very interesting attribute of conflict termination when you undertake operations. I think India is one of the very, very rare examples wherein if you go back into history right from 47 till date, not only internally but externally, all our conflicts have reached resolution, unlike the West involvement in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Russia, Ukraine, West Asia is, I think, all too obvious. So the endeavor is to look at shaping of the battle space, promoting asymmetric or a lateral thinking in interdependent domains. Some work is going on. However, next, there is a transformative challenge. If you see the graph, the technology manifestation for purposes of illustration is kept at X in terms of time. It is from linear going exponential. The leadership adaptability is the next which lag behind by a certain, in this case, 10x. And the most difficult, the organizational changes, which indicate that issue of processes is what is lagging behind by yet another 2.5 or 3 times at 25x. If you compare this with the cycle of adaptation from the time a new technology is triggered off to the time the plateau of productivities, our cognitive span takes it to 25 to 30 years. So it is not just merely adequate to procure or fabricate cutting edge technologies. Unless it can be integrated in the operations on ground, changing your tactics, techniques and procedures, I think it would be as good as handing over the technology to the enemy. So from the voice to the virtual, the direct to the indirect, or analog to digital, factor this in the issue of disinformation. There was a time when they said pictures don't lie. Is it really true now? From data to information, now we are transiting to the cognitive domain. Next. So are we there? Have we started? It is and shall always remain work in progress. Capabilities and capacities are a matter of journey because there is no destination to arrive here. The way the world is shaping up, the pace of it has picked up. So if you see the entire thing, what we endeavor as part of the developed nation vision in 2047, the envisaged role for the armed forces, the modernization plan of the Indian Army spanning all 5 verticals as are laid out, from restructuring, modernization, integration, systems and processes to human resources, the center of gravity at all under the decade of transformation. On the left bot side, if you see techno commanders, so what we are looking at, commanders used to earlier control forces in the field and use maneuver. Now we are talking of techno commanders who can control and utilize technology to cause that maneuver in multi-domains. Technology sovereignty. I think this Atmanirbharta has been adequately covered. Unless we get sovereignty in technology, we shall remain suboptimal. Cutting edge R&D, culture of innovation. Within the core, when we talk of walking the talk, we have IIT Ropert, we have IIM Amritsar, we have lovely professional university, we have Punjab Technical University. The ecosystem is not just restricted to meetings, conferences, workshops, demonstrations, or sharing of problem statement or a roadmap. An integrated roadmap, we have OEMs working with us. We have study teams of students from these institutes working with us for last 3 to 6 months on certain technologies which range from components to entire systems. Next. So if I was to conclude, the new line of control entails a web of connections where data, decision, and directions converge faster than the foe can react. Victory is not one who fights first, rather than the one who can think and act across multiple domains. So we talked of one mind, many dimensions, infinite possibilities. The one who can choreograph all this to end result, I think, will emerge victorious. It is time to walk the talk. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you for that. Lieutenant General Ajay Chandpuri, I request you to kindly stay on stage, sir. I request our Senior Executive Editor, Abhishek Kapoor, to kindly come up on stage and felicitate General Chandpuria, please. Thank you, sir, for being with us on the inaugural Forces First Conclave.
So, after a terrific address by General Bakshi, followed by really sumptuous lunch, which I hope does not put us to sleep. So it's my privilege to begin the next session, which is on the neighborhood watch. So ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, I would like to thank the Center for Land Warfare Studies and Republic Defense Group for organizing this rather strategically enriching Forces First Conclave and inviting me for the same. It is indeed my proud privilege to speak before this august gathering at a time when the world is witnessing dynamic political shifts. The pace of change is such that events of great consequence may be unfolding even as we speak. Technological transformation are reshaping national security paradigm, and in this context, today's topic, border management to battle space readiness, holds immense significance. The essence of this discussion lies not merely in the physical understanding of borders, but in understanding what borders truly represent. That is, the history, the legacy, and the emotions they evoke amongst people. The challenge before us, thus, is to understand all these diverse dimensions in order to evolve into a unified and responsive management system. Sindoor has clearly demonstrated that borders can quickly become theatres for multi-domain long-range operations, and we must recognize the same. As I mentioned earlier, the world is in a volatile flux, wherein almost on a daily basis, we hear and learn of new conflict zones emerging with previous ones still awaiting resolution. At the heart of most conflicts often lies the legacy border issues between the said nations. It may interest you to know that across the world, 60% of border segments are either contested in principle or being fought for violently. Over 90 plus nations are involved directly or indirectly in border conflicts, which my friend Chanpuria mentioned were about 110 now. So what does the border entail actually? At the core are the people of both affected nations. The historical perceptions, legacy laws, common terrain, emotions superimposed with political drives and geostrategic constraints influence how nations guard, do business across or manage the said borders. The same is done either by policing by the concerned border guarding force or by enforcing own perceptions militarily through dense deployments, holding, guarding, or patrolling every inch of the said border. We need to appreciate that borders exist everywhere and they run the risk of being contested. We often miss the fact that most conflicts around the world stem from border-related issues. But the larger point remains, borders should actually serve to regulate relations between nations, not become the cause of new confrontations. So what does drive border exploitation? It is maybe the greed or self-perceived right to gain more of what is available, more resources, more landmass, more of everything. Social and geopolitical issues, economic disparity, and demographic issues that exist between neighbors that often manifest into borders being exploited. Coupled with all this are the dark business structures of narcotics, human trafficking, weapon smuggling, and the devious intent to push state and non-state actors to create instability in the neighboring nation. The sum total being that any nation which primarily wants well-being of its citizens cannot allow its borders to be exploited or land be encroached upon. In our national context, we have over 15,000 kilometers of the land borders and over 7,500 kilometers of the maritime zone spread across almost 7 different categories, to include the international boundary, the line of control, the line of actual control, and so on, with equal types of varied terrain from deserts to the glaciers, with up to almost 4,500 kilometers of these borders under some kind of a dispute. The border guarding forces of our nation face a daunting challenge to cover this vast, varied landscape. The overlap of multiple border guarding agencies and different bilateral arrangements across each of these borders makes the task immensely complex, wherein every sector requires different type of handling mechanisms and modus operandi. Amidst it all, we must and we do respect the ground realities and the emotions of people on either side. While we have a roti beti ka rishta with Nepal and the erstwhile free, which is now restricted, move regime with Myanmar, these stand as examples of our sensitivity to the ground realities and the shared emotions of the people living on both sides of these borders, something not mirrored with our other neighboring nations. At the heart of the complete concept is the whole of nation approach, wherein borders are required to be looked from perspective of national security, with ultimate aim being to respect all, but finally keeping our national interest and sovereignty paramount. Now, since I am coming from the northeast, this is an excellent platform to present the Eastern Theatre to you. Border management in the Northeast involves looking after 5 nations spread across more than 8,000 kilometers of frontage, ranging from fenced, unfenced, open, troop-intensive, and some portions still being fenced. The challenges that the border guarding forces face in Northeast are immense, with unmarked borders, insurgencies, and the impact of external factors like cross-border smuggling of arms and narcotics, shadowed under the influence of some neighboring nations. Added to this are the natural and logistical hardships, the difficult terrain, unpredictable weather, remoteness of location, extreme climatic conditions, sparse population, poor connectivity, and infrastructural bottlenecks that test both the military and the civil administration in equal measure. Hence, the broad question remains, do we have enough focus on our borders? And here, I would like to take one of the terms which you would often see on a border road as you are moving on the borders made by the roads made by the BRO, Savdhani hati, Durghatna ghati. The conundrum will always remain, but our eyes can never be taken off it. One has to remain alert at all times, constantly attuned to the myriad signs and subtle indicators along these frontiers. With the internal dynamics of some of our neighbors in a perpetual state of fluidity, border management in the Northeast is an ever-evolving and dynamic endeavor, demanding the highest level of coordination amongst all stakeholders. Compounding these challenges is the shadow cast by greater powers, most prominently China, over our neighborhood. Over more than a year now, we have also witnessed the growing involvement of Pakistan in Bangladesh's domestic and geopolitical affairs, adding yet another layer of complexity to the Northeast security calculus. As we understand the challenges before us, the prevailing concept has been to guard the borders physically, with fences and troops. This approach gained emphasis in the 1990s, with the aim of creating administratively controlled infrastructure, posts, watchtowers, and fencing to sustain, survive, and prevent intrusions. While this was necessary at this time, the method largely leaned upon policing rather than agile, dynamic response. In doing so, we have probably been slow to adapt to the rapidly evolving nature of border infringements. Today's global and regional threat landscape is marked by hybrid warfare, rising cross-border illegal activities, the growing influx of undocumented refugees, and warfare evolving across multiple domains. Added to this is the power of advanced technology in the hands of individuals, amplifying the reach of non-state actors. With Ops Sindoor being a defining point, it is now quite clear that the shadow of an active western border with constant pressure from our northern and eastern borders is the new normal we have to live with and prepare for. Over the past decade, we have witnessed a rapidly changing threat landscape, marked by the proliferation of weapons, drugs, ethnic conflict in the Northeast, including significant demographic shifts in Assam and West Bengal. This, coupled with the volatility of the western borders and further compounded by major standoffs on the northern borders, may have exposed some inadequacies in adapting to the new strategic realities. With the ever-advancing capabilities of our adversaries, the imperative to transform and evolve has never been greater. It's not the time to sit back and deliberate. It is the time to act decisively. It is indeed the time to start thinking of our borders as battle spaces and view our borders through the lens of urgent preparedness, for when called upon, we must be unyielding. Ops Sindoor stands as a powerful reminder and a call to action, demanding that each one of us accelerate our commitments, sharpen our resolve, and stand unwavering in defense of the nation. Of course, we do face significant challenges, by way of legacy systems and processes, interagency coordination issues, logistical difficulties across harsh terrain and weather, technology integration, and sustaining this transformation economically as a developing nation. The collusive nature of our adversary, with one nation effectively influencing all others, has exponential impact too. However, what probably hurts us most are the slow pace of our processes and execution. Unlike our adversaries, who benefit from streamlined, linear, and authoritative system that enable rapid infrastructure and have faster growth, our processes, born out of our democratic values of inclusion, deliberation, and transparency, tend to be slow and tardy, leading to delays that unforgivingly create gaps in all domains that become increasingly difficult to bridge. However, with the strong intent being demonstrated over the years now at the highest levels, all present and future challenges, I am sure, remain within our reach to overcome. There is therefore a need for a conceptual shift in how we view our borders. They must no longer be viewed as marked lines on a map, but as multi-domain operational zones, zones which require clear intelligence picture much beyond borders and surveillance along the entire frontier. These areas demand rapid and simultaneous response across all domains. Our focus must move beyond just rapid projection to deterrence. Guarding the sovereign edge of our nation has to be an integrated whole-of-nation effort, and one solution does not fit all border segments. A customized solution for each border that integrates all resources of the government, keeping the people at its core. The arrangement so created, when required, can be the foundation for war-fighting readiness as well. As the world's fourth largest economy, our nation's comprehensive national power must be effectively applied across the dime-T domain, with our national strategic outlook serving as the overriding framework. This strategic outlook must recognize our borders as dynamic battle spaces of national sovereignty requiring focused attention. True strength across all domains is essential, and the intent, resolve, and urgency we demonstrate today will ultimately determine how we will protect our borders tomorrow. It is imperative that all stakeholders, especially the border guarding forces, continuously enhance their level of preparedness and capability, operating in a fully integrated manner across all domains to defend and fight effectively. So, in my opinion, the way forward lies in adopting a whole-of-nation approach, or rather a whole-of-stakeholder approach. We need to institutionalize multi-domain thinking, to invest in surveillance and rapid mobility of our border guarding forces. The same must be overlapped with the coordinated border area development plan, dual-use infrastructure like we saw in the Bharatmala projects as well. Policies must be revisited to effectively manage migration and the refugee crisis. In many areas of the Northeast, reverse migration is also necessary, and efforts should focus on encouraging people to return by making it more attractive through initiatives such as improved infrastructure, enhanced livelihood opportunities, better access to education and healthcare, and targeted economic incentives that make reverse migration both feasible and desirable. We need to encourage border area tourism and make the vibrant border villages our priority. Civil administrators operating in these areas must be sensitized towards national security challenges, as every timely action by them can enhance our nation's long-term security. For example, timely clearance given or a dual infrastructure project proposal passed may lead to long-term positive strategic implications. Similarly, Our national security agencies need to ride on the technological overdrive being initiated by the Government of India. They need to upgrade, adapt, and achieve expertise in ISR, cyber, artificial intelligence, and other fields. All outputs then on could be shared in real-time basis with all those who matter, regardless of the color of the uniform one wears or from which ministry one belongs to. All uniformed forces need to create organizations and structures which are threat and terrain based and hence are agile and lethal. In the case of the army, the newly created structures like the Bhairav battalions and the Rudra brigades represent a significant step towards this goal. Superimposed over all this should be integrated planning and operational logistic. Both factors combined will enable us to have a coordinated approach to emerging and dynamic threats, ensuring our transition to a better linked, reactive, and agile force. All these changes, of course, must be executed under the overarching ambit of exploiting new technology. Niche fields, for example, 3D printing, tunnel boring, etc., for infrastructure creation, artificial intelligence, big data, and quantum computing for faster sensor analysis and decision making, and exploiting the unmanned systems is a mandatory requirement to augment the human capability today. Systems based on new technology can be a force multiplier when we look at transforming ourselves into a battle space ready, cohesive, multi-domain force. Basically, we should change how we think, how we perceive border security, and then collaboratively work on our collective response. The will and intent to innovate, upgrade, and adapt could be the mantra for achieving battle space readiness. To conclude, in my understanding, our aim should be simple and uncompromising. We must synchronize our actions from the planning stage onwards, thinking as one entity, with ultimate objective to defend, deter, and dominate. On the border, defense remains foundational. Deterrence is the objective, and dominance in critical domain will ensure long-term stability on the borders. With this, I thank you all for giving me a patient hearing. May we all see our great nation rise to the glory that it truly deserves. Thank you once again, and Jai Hind.
In fact, I want to start this session by saying that a big thank you to the Indian Army, because not often do we really get a chance to have an interaction with a serving military intelligence officer. I take the immense pride that Brigadier Sushil Tanwar, who started 27 years ago after Operation Parakram, entered into military intelligence. Brigadier Tanwar, I want to begin by asking you, not an easy task when you actually started in military intelligence 27 years ago. In Jammu and Kashmir, things were very, very different, and that shows the changing nature of intelligence. That point in time, we were told that you cannot trust anyone in Jammu and Kashmir. Having an asset inside Jammu and Kashmir at that point in time, I want to start with that.
Thank you. Although I am not as primitive as your question and my answer would suggest, but definitely a lot of things have changed over last many years. And I would just encapsulate them in 6 M's, or 6 mores as I call them. First is more threats. The complexity and the diversity of threats has increased. National security is no longer only about armed forces or counter-terror operations. Organized crime networks, transnational groups, narco-terror linkages, social unrest, disinformation, and all of that. And intelligence agencies now have to respond to all of these complex threats. The second is more information. We no longer have to rely on single or a select source of information. Earlier, if the adversary was making a road or a bridge, somebody had to go and photograph it. Now we have satellite imagery, communication, electronic intelligence. So the number of sensors has increased. The third is more speed. the way this data or the information is flowing is very fast. Yesterday, when the fighter aircrafts of Pakistan and the drones took off from Peshawar and Nur Khan and bombed the civil areas in Afghanistan, within minutes everybody knew. So the speed of information has dramatically changed. The fourth is more users. Everyone wants intelligence. The soldier on the line of control, the units in the counter-terror operations, the law enforcement agencies, the business institutions, the policy planners. And therefore, intelligence agencies have to curate the intelligence responses to all these differing requirements. The fifth is more providers. Now we have various agencies, cyber, technical, human, internally, financial, and therefore the challenge is how do you aggregate and analyze the inputs coming from various providers. And the last one, and probably the most important one, is more expectations and responsibility. So we have to be more responsible to all of these requirements. So these 6 broad additions, 6 mores, are driven by one single fundamental factor, and that is the advent of technology, how it has transformed the way intelligence is seen. And obviously we have seen how the nature of warfare itself is changing, and the world of intelligence is not immune to these changes. Coming back to J&K, there was a time when the degree and the time of interaction with the source was paramount. There was a lot of physical interaction with the source. The individuals were in far-flung areas, they had to physically reach out to you. So that has changed. Now means of communication are much faster. Now we are scanning social media accounts, online activities for potential recruits, for potential suspects. So fundamentally, I think the way intelligence agencies operate, that has changed a lot in last few years. But what agencies have to do is to embrace this change and evolve new methods, new principles, and a new mindset. The point about you could not trust anybody in J&K, I am not very comfortable with this particular statement, because the success that we have had over last so many years would not have come to security forces if it was not for those large segment of individuals who worked for us and gave us that information which gave us success. So trust, I think it's a very nebulous, very two-way street, and there are enough people in J&K whom you can trust.
I was talking about the time that you actually started, when it must have been quite difficult. I want to share this with everyone present here. Just about after Operation Sindoor, as a journalist, when I got an information and couple of photographs actually landed, and these photographs were of terror bases and the fact that they've moved to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. In fact, it went to such an extent that there were pictures of Jaish and Lashkar-e-Toiba bases moved, videos that had come out. I often wondered, have we reached to such an extent now we have actually pictures of the terror bases, in fact, just outside. I had a video landing on my phone of the Lashkar-e-Toiba Jaish videos of their bases in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, showing the transition that's actually taking place, moving away from POK. How have we really changed? Human intelligence, SIGINT completely changing. The dynamics of it both really changing.
So yes, as I mentioned earlier, the fundamentals of intelligence have changed. The capabilities have become much more enhanced. I won't like to go into what are those capabilities, do we have the pictures and specifics of that. But the fact of the matter is that intelligence agencies continuously try to get the best information, have an information advantage, and that is a task that is to be done on a routinely basis. The capabilities, certainly because of various technologies, as I mentioned, communication, satellite imagery, electronic, and all of these, they have changed. But to me, the human interaction and engagement, it remains the basic skill set of an intelligence operator. So the basic traits for which individuals provide information: ideology, compromise, revenge, ego, incentive, money. So those basic traits are not going to change, and it is for the intelligence operatives to see as to how best they can exploit these basic human traits.
You have your with our neighbors in the manner that they are carrying out their work, and particularly in today's time, there is an attempt that has been made to mislead us. When an intel input actually comes of that nature, and in today's time, especially with changing electronic warfare, how do you really trust any of these information that comes in? How do you really have an authentic intelligence input? What is it in the first place?
I think as far as an input is concerned, so we've mentioned that there are various ways through which inputs are coming. Human inputs are generally easy to judge because you have had a long interaction with the source. So the handler is, I think, with experience, with knowledge and with skill, is in a reasonable position to estimate the veracity of the input, and that is why we have a system of grading of inputs. But what probably helps also now is that there are multiple other ways of checking on an input. So for example, hypothetically speaking, if you would get an input of the presence of terrorists in a particular area, there would be other ways also to check whether that input is right, and that those other ways could be some other source, some other agency, some technical surveillance over that area. So the ambiguity of an input has to be removed by the handler, and that is a part of the skill set that an intelligence operative needs to have, is not to blindly trust and report any input, analyze it at his own end, correlate, collate, and synthesize it with other inputs that are available, and then give a reasonably clear picture to the commander or to the hierarchy.
Brigadier Tanwar, many a times when you have a Pahalgam, or starting from Kargil, almost everyone is quick to come to a conclusion saying that intel failure hai. Be it the media or anyone would come to the first thing, intel failure hai, without realizing the number of successes that you may have actually seen preventing a Kargil, preventing a Pahalgam. I want to ask you, intelligence failure, what does it mean for a military intelligence officer, and what goes through your mind when you are actually told every time, ye intel failure tha?
Intel failure is the elephant in the room, and frankly, when without going into again the specifics, there may have been times when int agencies may have misread or misinterpreted or failed to detect certain indicators. But overall, I think intelligence failure is a very convenient and a very reflexive response to any action. When we look at intelligence failure, and I just want to break it down for you and the audience, there could be 4 parts of an intelligence failure. First is intelligence to collect or acquire information, when the agencies do not actually get any input. The second is intelligence failure to share the intelligence. Like in Pearl Harbor, the US naval ships were intercepting the communication of the Japanese, but it was not shared. The third is the failure to analyze, when there are certain indicators, when you fail to join the dots and you fail to present a cogent picture. And the fourth is the failure to act, when the user or when the responder does not have enough trust in the input or does not take the input seriously. So intelligence failure is a very complex term, and it's got many stakeholders, and it is very easy to actually brandish this term. But notwithstanding that, I think the intelligence agencies have to carry the burden of proof, and they have to ensure that they are ahead of the curve, and they don't take their eyes off the ball.
When you fail, what happens? When you fail, and when you actually, you're essentially told, because you will be behind the scenes all your time. Even if you have a success, you will not be, perhaps, no one is going to come and pat your back by saying that great job.
No, I don't agree to that. I think there is enough motivation and encouragement for the agencies in wherever they are. But obviously, failures can happen. I mean, nobody is infallible. As an intelligence professional myself, there have been times when I felt that I should have known a thing better. And there is no shame in admitting that the failures may happen. It would happen. But one has to learn from that failure and ensure that it doesn't happen again. Unfortunately, the cost of the failures of intelligence is quite high. And therefore, I think it is a collective responsibility as well. I don't, patting the back, the intelligence professionals, they have to live with the fact that they will stay unsung, unheard, and probably unheralded.
I want to ask you this because from my experience of covering the Ukraine war at the beginning of it, what we essentially witnessed was this. When the Russians started coming in, you've had families pulling out their phone, capturing a video, and there was an application that was created by the Ukrainian government, and you could immediately upload it, and you were basically part of that entire intelligence community or the system. For us, for the longest time, the image of an intelligence officer is that of a James Bond. How does the intelligence officer really look like, and how can we really blend this? Someone, you and I, anyone in this room, I and you, anyone can be an intelligence officer. Is that a possibility?
So yeah, I think Sir has answered that, but this common perception is that of a James Bond, guns, gadgets, glamour. But I would like you to draw attention towards George Smiley, another iconic fictional character, the spy who came in from the cold, tinker, tailor, soldier spy. Unassuming, subdued, unflamboyant. And personally, I think we need more George Smileys than James Bonds.
I just want to end this. You've written extensively about a lot of stories, and I don't know whether to believe that these are real stories or not. He's written a book called Mukhbir. I want to just ask you this. Any real stories that you can share, perhaps, now that it is out in open and everyone wants to hear a spy story from a spy man?
No, this book, Mukhbir, is a collection of 17 short stories, all based in J&K. And this is an honest portrayal of the relationship between the security forces and the people of Jammu and Kashmir, because I personally believe that, as I mentioned earlier, that the success that we have got over the years is because of Mukhbirs, the informers, and the support of a large segment of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So these stories are about that. So you can read them if you want to actually read a espionage story. But since you insist, despite my telling you not to, there is, a place I would just very briefly narrate about a place, Mada in Surankot, Punch district, which was troubled by militancy. It was early 2000s, and the people of Mada, they decided that they will not allow the terrorists of Lashkar and Toiba at that time to run riot, to behave the way they were behaving, and they themselves on their own. We have heard of Ikhwanis in Kashmir Valley, but in Punch region, this group of very brave, very valiant people, they collaborated with people like us, the intelligence units, the security forces, and ensured that their area became clear of militancy. Op Sarfinash, a lot of people would have heard. A singular achievement of local people who decided that terrorism cannot stay in their land. And I would say that this was not an intelligence operation, this was a people's operation, obviously facilitated by the intelligence agencies and the security forces. And this also shows that what I mentioned earlier, that human engagement and human interaction remains a basic skill set of an intelligence operator. If you can interact with the target audience, with the local population, then I think there are enough opportunities to do a espionage operation, to do a spy story. And every man is a sensor. Every man can be a spy, and I think there is a spy in each one of us.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Tanwar.
Thank you for that, Shawan. I'd request you and Brigadier Tanwar to please stay on stage as we'd like to felicitate. Thank you, Brigadier Tanwar. Thank you for being with us.
Been a long day, but we're ending with a session where I would say, General Dikuna, thank you very much. A departure from what we have done. You've agreed to sit on a panel with us. So I want to straight away begin by asking you, the image that we played just a short while back of the very night when we saw a swarm of drones coming into our territory, and the spectacle that India witnessed, the ability to bring them down, has brought a big question. And that question is about air littoral. Now that's becoming the big buzzword. What exactly is air littoral? Who exactly manages it? What's the airspace control that we are really talking about?
It's like this that, the air littoral is a term, it's a new term which basically comes from the word maritime littoral. Where in the maritime littoral you have the shore and the sea and the coast, wherein the ability of the susceptibility to influence, or control either the sea from the land or control the land from the sea is what is a maritime littoral. Now, when you extend this to what you just asked me, is what is an air littoral? Well, the air that is in proximity to the land, the proximal domain, it could extend to any dimension, but the proximal domain to surface operations is what is an air littoral. Now, if you look at the nature of war, it's constant, but the character of war has changed. And what has happened is that if you see Op Sindoor, in what way has this character changed? The air threat has changed. And so this new dimension of drones, loiter ammunitions, EW intensive environments, counter drone equipment. I mean, if you just take a square kilometer in space, you would have possibly 50 drones of ours, 50 of the adversary. You had about 25 counter UAS systems to bring down those drones. You would have about 25 EW systems, electronic warfare systems. So this particular proximal domain has got complicated. And now you look at this, that if you use drones to saturate radars and then use a high-speed missile, you've got slow-speed drones. That's the hybrid threat. If this manifests the way it can, you've got a new threat which is going to throw up a lot of challenges, where you finally exhaust your ammunition over saturation rates while the sneak-through of the missile gets through. So the whole proximal domain has undergone a change, wherein the rules of engagement are going to change. The situational awareness has to improve. The sensor today, the whole concept of this proximal domain is how do you identify the drone? How do you detect him? What are the sensors that you require? And today the sensors that we had during Op Sindoor, which were in very few numbers, they were medium level radars and long range radars. The ability to pick up the small drone and to be able to engage that small drone is where the challenge lies. And this entire spectrum of aerial threat manifests in the proximal domain. Now, whether you want to call it the proximal domain as an air littoral of a certain dimension, that's a matter of how do you want to put it across. But this proximal domain requires to be taken care of. It needs to have a detection ability. It needs to have an identification ability. It needs to have proper command and control networks, which the ISCCS and the Akash Tir between the Indian Air Force and the Army, we have brought together. but it has to move out into a separate domain into the tactical battle area. And I think that is very important. And the ability, when you have so many flying objects, so many, you're going to choke bandwidths. And I think that's where the challenge lies. So if you want to have the ability to, engage effectively, you've got to be able to have distributed networks, decentralized operational ability. This capability has to go down to the div commanders and the brigade commanders. So I think that's where the whole concept of air littoral or proximal domain to the surface force operations has changed dramatically.
I want to ask you this, just a bit of a follow-up, General Dushyant, from General Dukuna, with regards to how did you actually manage this? The part that you talk about, you have a swarm of drones. These are low-cost drones. It does not really cost the Pakistanis much. It just exhausts our radars. Then we basically bring in the aspect of our, the ability to target, be it the S-400 or various others, Akash Tir being one classic example of the usage. How do you really manage it? Because at the end of it, one drop from the drones would have been the biggest difficulty for the Army Air Defense to control. How do you really do that? How do you really control that?
So I think the entire challenge lies in training. And as a drone, carries a greater payload, the speed variance and the altitude variance changes. So I think that the ability in training to be able to pick up this drone when it's flying. So you also have the ability with the visual ability to see this drone. And I think that's very important, that a drone with a payload has a greater ability to be detected, because he's got a bigger dimension, because he's carrying a payload. So he'll have a bigger engine. So he's easier to pick up. So I think that's how the rules of engagement change, that when you see a bigger drone, you know there's a possibility that he might be carrying a payload. And that's why engage him first. And hence the rules of engagement change as you look at capability. So saturation rates are meant to distract you from what is actually carrying the payload. And I think that difference is where training comes in, because that's not what radars can detect. Radars just show you a picture. You've got to be able to differentiate in that picture what is going to actually cause damage to you, and bring down fire, effective fire, in as short a time frame as possible on that aerial threat.
General Dushyant, this brings us to the aspect of grey zone warfare, and perhaps that's the biggest threat, that's the biggest incoming threat that India faces at this point in time. I want to ask you, during Operation Sindoor, you've had some classic moments by the Pakistanis, and the very fact that there was an attempt made by the Pakistanis to send out a particular message. And in fact, I think so we do have a copy of it. We'll try and play that out. We'll show that. I don't know which was that. When was this? This was during the operation then that you got the message?
Yeah, it's during the operation.
Give us a sense, because that perhaps tells us the grey zone area that we're talking about. What really happened and what were they targeting?
Okay, first of all, thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to talk on this very important topic called grey zone. The next thing, before I actually go on to grey zone per se, I'll briefly add on to what General Dukuna has said in a simpler language, so that you all understand what is air littoral and what are the difference and what are the challenges for airspace control in this air littorals. First of all, gallantry awards to all of you who are sitting here till now about quarter to 6, and so my compliments to each one of you. Thank you very much for having having listened to us for so long. Another 15-20 minutes and we'll be done with it. As far as air littorals are concerned, in terms of simple language, it is that the tactical battle area has other weapon systems. When I talk of tactical battle area, I am talking of army forces. In case of India, we are already in the tactical battle area. That's the major difference. If you see along the line of control, moment the war is joined, what happened this time? Moment the war joined, we had strikes coming on the people who are deployed along the LC. So therefore, they have to defend themselves. And what are these strikes coming from? There are strikes coming from either the artillery or drones. So you have to actually deal with the drones. So you can't have a control over this by another agency. So therefore, there is this debate going on as to how much of a control has to be there of the land forces, how much of the air forces. So this particular issue is being sorted out. So this is the reason why we are talking about the air littorals. The heights have increased. The drones can come from very high distances. They are not seen by the radars, but visually, like you said, they can be seen. So therefore, we can actually identify and probably engage them in a much better manner. So these are the issues which are there. So that's about the air littoral. Coming down to the grey zone. Look, grey zone has changed everything. You must have seen in the first slide which GOC 11 Corps gave, Chandpurya, that there are 110 conflicts. The chief mentioned 52 conflicts. I have mentioned somewhere 31 conflicts. Why these differences? These differences are coming because of grey zone. Do you think the conflict between India and Pakistan has stopped? No, sir. 1947 onwards till today, we are in conflict with India, with Pakistan. So therefore, our conflict is going on. It is either sometimes kinetic and sometimes non-kinetic. That is the actual impact of grey zone warfare. It is continuing the conflict into domains because of its, I would say, deniability, because of its unpredictability, because of the fact that you cannot pinpoint who is the adversary who is doing this to you. So there are many factors in grey zone warfare. Russia-Ukraine war, it's not from the last 3.5 years. It is from 2014 onwards. Grey zone war is taking place in that place. So when the Operation Sindoor started off, I'll give you 2-3 quick examples so that you all understand. There was a YouTube program which was going on, Formidable Pakistan Air Force. This was a short YouTube video which went on during the, I think, 7th or the 8th May night. By the time this program finished in Pakistan, the viewership was about 900 people. That's all. I woke up in the morning and I saw it was around 10,000 and multiple platforms. By the evening, 50 million. 50 million views. What does it make? It actually takes this particular video across to other frontiers, international arena. In fact, you found this video playing very, very fast in the US, because in the US there is TikTok, so TikTok picked it up. We don't have a TikTok in the US. So our narrative was not even going there. You'll be surprised to see the kind of comments which we were getting on our YouTube, which we do with 2-3 of our friends together, about what was actually being played out in the US. I will request if you have those, if you have it, fine. Otherwise, okay. This is the listeners' feedback of YouTube program or the TikTok programs which were going on in the US. Look at the narratives which were going on. There was no one to counter it. No one. India was already on the back foot on the first day, as far as international narratives go. And people make their views from these kind of videos. These are all 2.5, 3 and 30 seconds, 1 minute videos, that kind of a thing. So what the feedback that fellow gave to us, look, he's also giving us a solution also. Go to the next one. India can't fight this narrative war from Indian soil alone. I think there is a big message here. When we ban a TikTok, either we are virtually present there or we use our diaspora by funding, by budgeting, whatever you want to do. This is the age of Krishna. V.S. Sutankar actually described Krishna as he is a cynic who preaches high morality and stoops down to the lowest tricks in the trade. And then he goes on to add that he made a man who had never said a lie tell a lie only once in his life. This is the era which we are fighting, and if you look at this, he suggests, give the narrative to Gen Z, we will fight your war. I think there is a big message for us in this particular, these 2 slides which I am showing you all, that in the next time round, we need to do a lot of things as far as grey zone war is concerned. Attacking the mind is very important, not only within India, but outside India. So therefore, message to all the leading channels. I know you all are having your the world channels, etc. But I think we need to go beyond that. We need to go in the digital era. I'll tell you what is the, and this is the second one. This was a direct tweet to me. This is a direct tweet to me in which he says, General, I mean, he addresses me, it's an ISI handle, you can make this handle is gone now. General, initially we were not aware what was happening. Kudos to our media which actually swept the narrative. Kudos to our planning where we actually orchestrated the Op Sindoor narrative war initially quite well. But look at his second tweet. In the thread which is mentioned next to the first one, he says, now the narrative has changed. Even Imran Khan is actually endorsing that the army is now being recognized as a better or in control of things in Pakistan, and it's only the army which can control Pakistan. And finally, he gives a message for the future. You think IWT is, you've done a great job with IWT? The blood will flow in the water, and what else he has said, I think I can't read here, but there will be a religious war within your country. This is if you read the language properly, it's a typically ISI handle which has responded to a particular thing. So what it is happening is that they are not only monitoring the big channels, they are also monitoring people who are in places of authority who can do something to change the mindset of the people. So my take is that in the next round, we should be focusing more and more on information war, on the cognitive domain, hitting the mind of various people, dividing your categories. You have to hit the Pak military also. You have to hit the Pak people also. You have to hit a number of targets in this particular, war of cognitive war or attacking the mind, etc. is concerned. I'll give you one last example of what happened in Pakistan. There was a narrative which was set in Pakistan after the Op Sindoor, and it was glorious in peace, victorious in war. And I want to add today to this, is equal to makes you a field marshal. Okay, this was the narrative which was played in across the board in the country before he was made the field marshal. So what I'm saying is, half truths can become full truth, and full truth can give you victory, which may not be actually a victory, but it has become a victory for Pakistan. We need to work on two areas. One is our outside narrative. Two is our international reach has to increase. I'm sorry, I'm pointing out here that we also found that either the briefings were not going regularly to them. Our international diplomats, etc., they should have come out more vociferously on the international media. I think that was something which I feel next time round we should be doing something about it. Thank you.
Well, in terms of narrative, I'll come back to it, General Dushyant, but I want to just bring back the focus a little bit, General Dikuna, with regards to the air littoral. Reason being that air littoral dominance, Nagorno-Karabakh being one such example, Russia, Ukraine being the other, it basically demands a multi-domain integration. Brings back to the question, who really manages this? And is there still a fight that is still going on as to who exactly takes control of it?
No, I think that what Op Sindoor has taught us, that although it was not conflict in its entirety, what we realize is that different stages and phases of battle, the control of the TBA, which is the primacy lies with the Army Air Defense, in that battle space, you have to have flexibility to operate the way you want to. And we understand that in the initial days of the battle, the Air Force may not be predominantly in the TBA, and the dronal threat would be much higher. So the integration of both the Army and the Air Force is, we are very working towards this as to how we got to synchronize this ability in this proximal domain or the air littoral. To what heights should this tactical battle space, provide the flexibility to the ground force operations to be able to succeed, because it is not possible to handle such a huge amount of air threat coming in simultaneously. It is not humanly. You have to have systems which are networked. You have to have systems which are decentralized. You got to have systems which are automated. You got to have AI controlled systems, because otherwise we're going to result into fratricide. And the final story of this lies that the ability for ground forces to have the freedom of maneuver while simultaneously having the air power to have the freedom of action in the air. The combination of these two will provide the national objective the way we want to see it and see national security come up the way we want it.
If I have to ask you from your experience, because those very nights, what we saw was not one particular area, it was spread across. At the same time, you had multiple drones coming in from various areas, not just to a single area to be targeted. The fact of the matter is that it brings out a huge gap. It brings out the fact that perhaps they have tried their best to try out as much as we can as far as our systems are concerned. What's that big lesson that we have learned from Operation Sindhu, particularly when it comes to the air defense?
I think that we realize that an extremely sound situational awareness, which the Air Force and the Army put out in the form of the ISCCS and the Akash Theatre picture, the ability to have a tremendous plethora of ground-based air defense weapon systems, starting from different type of guns to shoulder-fired missiles. So having a very layered and tiered air defense to be able to, take on threats of different caliber of air threats. I think that's a very important lesson that we learned. And the way ahead is jointness. The way ahead is synergy. The way ahead is in the TBA to give flexibility to the man on ground in not a restrictive, but in an enabling environment. After all, when any life is under threat, he must be provided the freedom of action to operate in the earliest time frame. And this will only be possible when the sensor to shooter link, the kill chain is as short as possible. And that's what we realized.
General Dushan, this brings us to the fact that, the lost narrative that we spoke about Operation Sindoor, we were squeamish about the fact that we managed to carry out, as I've been saying, one of the finest military operations. We have carried out the fact that these were terror bases that were being targeted. What was being targeted on the other side? It was civilian areas. But could we really pass on that message that, look here, all that the Pakistanis were able to propagate was that they were basically trying to target our military installations, but the fact of the matter is that General Dikuna would say that we've repelled all those, but yet that message did not go. There is a lost narrative that seems to have come into the picture.
See, I don't think there was a lost narrative as such. You see, we were fully aware, I think, before we went in for this operation, that we were targeting the terrorist camps. We had an objective. What did they have as an objective? They had as an objective to kill terrorists. Where are the terrorists in India? So therefore, they straight away, we knew, like Deputy Chief Strat said, that we had war gamed it as to first order effect, second order effect. So we knew that the response is going to come onto the military. And since the military is co-located in certain areas with the civilians, civilian casualties will take place. Yes, we, I think, did not focus to the extent that we should have focused on the civilian casualties which we were having, although we did do it. But I think at the broader level, we continued to focus more on the fact that tactical issues. We should have gone in for issues which actually ring bell with the international environment. Civilian casualties, targeting of people while medical emergencies, etc. Still the Pakistanis were firing onto our area, especially Punch, religious places. We did that, but not to the extent we should have done it. I think that needed more.
What's the pattern that you saw? What's the pattern that the generals here in India saw in terms of coming in from Pakistan, particularly this time during Operation Sindoor and post-Operation Sindoor?
Okay, I think from the Pakistani perspective, there were 2-3 things which were happening. Pakistan was clearly picking up issues wherever there was information blanks. For example, about the aircraft damages. I think they played it quite well across Pakistan as also across the world. What we did not do was that we didn't ask the questions, how many you lost? I think that was something which we should have done, a counter narrative. an offensive narrative rather than a defensive narrative.
What did they lose?
How much did they lose? Right? I mean, all of you are aware, this has been said many number of times. Air Chief has also said about it. 10 to 13 is the approximation which has been made, and out of which some we have concrete proof of. So therefore, I think that narrative slightly came a little late. And if it had come a little earlier, around the same time, I think we would have gained more traction. The Pakistanis would have been put under a certain amount of pressure from the media perspective, from the information warfare perspective, because those guys actually snatched that opportunity from us. Essentially continuing to play, even if they were guffawing. Their defense minister was saying that, I would thank that lady who said that, what proof do you have? And he said the social media is abuzz about it, that there are about five or six aircrafts which have been downed. So therefore, I think at that point in time, we should have gone a little offensive. We should have taken the offensive narrative. That's one thing which I feel, one mistake probably we made there.
General Ikuna, in terms of the Pakistani tactics, during an Operation Sindoor and post that, what is it that you all have identified in terms of the change in the measure that they were doing? Because Operation Sindoor initial days, a debilitating effect that we saw. But then there was a change. The change was in terms of usage of drones, low-cost drones that were being. What's the larger picture that emerges?
So I think that what emerged is that while air defense protection to the TBA is something that we focused at tremendously, but we realized that our population centers and our centers of faith could also be targets in the future. And I think this is something that this realization has made us re-look at, how do we look at protecting our population centers, especially in close proximity to the IB or the LC, and what resource should we allocate, what sensors should we allocate to be able to protect these centers of faith or population centers, because they would have a huge cascading effect on morale, as a nation. So this is something that, and I think this is something we are seized with, and this is something that our Prime Minister has articulated very clearly when he's spoken of Sudarshan Chakra. If you see the terms of reference that we're now working towards, is looking at how, besides protecting vital installations in the country, important vulnerable areas and vulnerable points, how do we protect our population centers of faith? I think that's very important. And I think Sudarshan Chakra is going to look at a huge capability enhancement within the three services in the maritime domain to ensure that you take care of our population centers as well. So I think that's a very important factor that has been taken away.
I find this very interesting because you said that religious institutions were being targeted, and the fact that Golden Temple being one such. It's a fascinating story the way you've actually carried that out. But I want to ask you, were there other areas which were difficult to manage in terms of religious institutions or areas for us? And how challenging was it at that point in time?
It's amazing to know that the way we all rallied as a country, I think that is phenomenal, irrespective of religion. You have our ex-servicemen who were prepared to re-enroll and come back to fight. I think that talks phenomenally of our patriotism, and it was across religions, it was across people. They were concerned, and they were concerned with the ferocity of the drones, especially for those living in the close proximity or where the dronal threat manifested. And it was very heartening for commanders on ground. You got General Chandpuria here. You had these ex-servicemen, volunteering on their own. And, we realize this huge capability that we have. And also we are developing an app possibly today where you can use mobile phones to be able to generate dronal information as a sensor to everything else. I think we've got to have this capability infusion. And if the civil population, which we realized was so patriotic towards national security, national cause, it was a wonderful feeling. So why don't we use the capability of an Android phone with an app like you have in the Ukraine, the Ukrainian app? Why can't we do it and generate the same kind of input from multiple sensors and fuse this together? I think this is hugely a lesson that we also, another takeaway from this particular operation.
General Dushan, one final question that I want to take from you is with regards to the fact that we spoke about lost narrative and we couldn't capitalize on various aspects of Operation Sindoor itself, who exactly is responsible for it? Because I'll ask you this, because we seem to have been stuck upon the fact that how many aircrafts were downed.
No,
that was the bigger question
I get what
that they wanted to.
I get what you're hinting at. You see, in this environment of information domain, there are some structural gaps, and there are some cultural gaps, and there are some issues where we need more coordination. The first thing which I find here is that the higher level, we do not have a singular point of narrative building or information operations. In my view, I think at the NSC level, there should be something, National Security Council level, there should be a body which is actually driving the strategic narrative, right? Now, that can be a deputy NSA, Stratcom, or whatever way you want to call it, name is not important, but everything has to flow from that point, right? That is one. The second thing is that the tri-services level, where I found that there is a need for the CDS to actually have that capability of driving the information domain. So we had this time EDGPI, we have the Air Force Media Cell, we have the Navy Media Cell. I think there is a need for a tri-service Stratcom immediately, because the second round, when it takes place, we are not rightly sure. So these are the two big things as far as structural initiatives are concerned, and all this will only come when we start fighting through our integrated theatre commands. Unless we have that integration within us, we will have problems in the air littorals, we will have problems in the narrative building, we will have problems at the strategic level. You see, when we talk of jointness, I've been in the US for quite some time, 2 years I've spent there. When you bring in jointness, what happens? You forget your uniforms. You are a single cadre, you have equal stakes in it, and everybody fights as one man. HR is very important, let me tell you. Unless and until your minds are joined, integration will not happen. HR integration is the first step to jointness and integration. Unfortunately, that is not happening.
I thought HR was only for us.
No, sorry. HR is meant for everyone. You see, within a team you will do well. But if there are two teams brought together, there will always be, there will be always a kind of a dissension, or somebody would be cribbing against the other. I don't say that in a joint organization there will not be cribbing within, but it will be much lesser. Everybody would be working towards one objective. The turf is something which can only be broken. I am doing this particular effort right from the time when Admiral Arun Prakash was the Chairman Chiefs of Staff Committee. He had ordered a study. The study was guided by me under General Raj Shukla was my student at that point in time. He did a fantastic study. We presented it to the Combined Commanders Conference personally. But we got some responses which I don't want to share here. There has been a resistance, and it's 25 years to my study. That has been a bedrock. Almost 26 to 27 years from the Subramaniam study. How long are we going to drag our feet? I think we should not wait out for the US experience to play out like they took 50 years or 60 years to get integrated. I think we should learn from the history and experience and transform ourselves. There is a need for disruption in our structures as far as higher organization is concerned. Today, if we don't do that, tomorrow again our narrative or everything will have some missing link or losing some opportunities.
The last word to you, General Dikuna. Operation Sindoor and Operation Sindoor Part 2, as many would say. Your vision in terms of air defense, your vision from the learnings that we've had from, say, for example, Israel, with the kind of unmanned air surveillance systems that they brought in. What's your take here, your vision, and if at all there's an Operation Sindoor 2, what really happens with the air defense?
Well, I really don't hope there's going to be an Operation Sindoor 2, because I'm sure that Pakistan has learnt its lesson the way we wanted to drive it home. And we've also called out their nuclear bluff. So I don't hope there's an Op Sindoor. But assuming that you do a certain amount of prism gazing, I think the challenge to the air defense as a whole would be in two domains in times to come. And the first domain is the dronal threat. That's at the one part of the spectrum. And at the other part of the spectrum is hypersonics. And this is going to be the huge challenge. Between these two, between the drone threat and the hypersonic, the cruise missile threat, you will have to have a spectrum of air defense capability developed. It will have to be, and it doesn't come at a cheap cost, but unless you have this complete spectrum, you will not be able to provide the amount of air defense that is required to ensure that our national security objectives are met. Now, who has them in what quantum, that is discussion point. But the capability has to be developed. And it has to be indigenous. There is no doubt about it. Because, and if you look at indigenous capability, it's going to take time. But if I'm supposed to do prism gazing, this is what I would look at in its entirety. And I hope there's no Op Sindoor 2. And I'm sure Pakistan doesn't want an Op Sindoor 2.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, Lieutenant General Sumer Ivan Dikuna, for your deep, insightful perspectives. And I would like to now request our Editor-in-Chief, Arnab Goswami, to please come on the stage and felicitate our esteemed guests.
Thank you, General Dushyant. Thank you, General Dushyant and General Sumer Ivan Dikuna.